Tennessee. Did DAG for the first time in Vegas. Went back to Arizona, and now I'm here trying to learn as much as I can to take back home.
I'm Ark. I've been fighting for about 10 years now. I'm up in Michigan. I think probably my weakest point in two-sword fighting is probably my setups, so it's probably where I need the most work.
I'm Kronos. I'm from the Bay Area, specifically Hayward. I primarily swordboard, but I like to learn some mechanics of Florenti. So I do take a downstick, so when my shield gets broken, I have options.
This is my name and why I'm here. Shut up late.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are you from? And
Finish from here, Huntington Beach, 30 minutes away. I just started out Florentine like maybe 3-4 months ago. Want to learn how to get better faster.
Bulpin. I'm from Illinois. I've been fighting since 2006. I've not really fought flow at all, mostly sword and board.
I'm Ivy. I come from, I guess, Bay Area, more of the Pleasanton area. It's sort of pleasant. It's okay. I've been fighting for a year and a half, and I started Florentine, realized I wasn't so great at Florentine, switched to sword and board, and just wanted to actually have cleaner fighting, and so I'd rather learn from someone who knows best.
I'm Mountain. I'm from Ventura. I've been fighting for about 11 months and amp guard for about 2 months. I do flow and amped, and I arch and red and bell, and I just want to get better for amp.
Krogdor, fighting for kind of a long time, but haven't been in Belgar for very long. Great to learn new things.
Okay. Alright, so basically, aside from Ark talking about how he wants to learn setups, everyone else just kind of wants to get better, right? They just want like a beginning overview, kind of a foundation to start. Well, that's good. You guys want to introduce yourselves and tell how you've been fighting and what you fight?
Chrome.
Hello.
Been playing amp guard for 7 years. First bell event, love it so far. Very fun. I'm Coach. I've been playing amp guard for 2 years. This is my first bell event also. Fucking dope.
I'm Goric. I'm with the Urkai. This is my second battle for the ring and my third bell event and second day flowing.
Alright, so first off, I'm going to go over a few things like with two-sword that are important. What's really important in two-sword is you don't have a shield, right? So you're going to get hit in the hands, so it's really important to wear gloves, right? Your hands are really pretty delicate machines, so protect them, keep them safe. You know, some people wear, you know, whatever kind of gloves you end up preferring to wear, wear them. I specifically prefer gloves that don't have these big cuffs on my wrists, because it kind of makes it tougher to feel like if something clips on my wrist, you get like dirty looks. You know, like I used to wear kind of lower profiles like that, and that's kind of what I wear, like, you know, if I'm going to be like at a local practice or something, or sparring with friends. When I come out to a bigger event, I usually wear lacrosse gloves that are real similar to those that I've cut the cuffs off of. So protect your hands, right? It's really pretty important. It only takes one kind of busted up sword to bust up your hand real good, and then you can't fight for the rest of the weekend, sometimes even longer. So just protect yourself, you know, be proactive, right? Now with two-sword, what's really interesting about two-sword is that, you know, you've got two things, right, in either hand, and each thing can either be an offensive weapon or a defensive tool, right? The biggest flaw that you'll see in most two-sworders is that they're really one-hand dominant. Like they only fight with this one hand, and then this other weapon just kind of like hangs out here and like tries to swipe things, and then they throw, or they'll like try to knock somebody's weapon out of the way and throw. Like that's a huge flaw in what you're going to be doing in two-sword. So what you really need to do, I know what I want you guys to do to kind of start this class off, just so I can see. I want you guys to raise your dominant hand. Okay? You can raise your left arm, it's okay. any of you guys claim to be ambidextrous? Do you guys like write with both hands?
I write with one hand.
Right. Can you write as well with your dominant hand as your less dominant hand?
Not as well, but I can still write. It's
Right.
still legible. I do other things with my other hands.
Okay.
I kind of like switch off activities.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you a little secret. There's only one person that I've ever met who is as close to ambidextrous as I've ever seen, and it's actually my coworker who works on a CAD machine, right? And the man can seriously like write with one hand across the page, switch his pencil in his other hand and write, and you can't tell the difference. Okay, like it's pretty amazing. But he's been doing that his whole life, ever since he was a little kid. Now, even though he's that ambidextrous, he can still throw a ball better with his right hand. He can still spike a volleyball better with his right hand. He can still bump a volleyball better with his right hand, right? His left hand can do those things, it's just not as good. So, true ambidexterity is really kind of a myth, in my opinion. Because everyone's going to be slightly better at some tasks than others with their other hand, right? Even if I brush my teeth every single day with my left hand, then eventually, and trying to achieve ambidexterity brushing my teeth, eventually my left hand might get better than my right hand, then I'm not ambidextrous, right? So sword fighting is very much the same. Like, my left hand over years of training has gotten really pretty good, but my right hand is still much better, and I know it, and I can feel it. It's a little bit, my right hand's a little bit faster, a little bit stronger. It's just kind of how it is, and I continually work to better my left hand to make it better, right? So what I want you guys to do for a little while is I want you to pick a partner, somebody kind of like equal skill level as you, and spar with your offhand single sword.
Do you want us to be hand or is it okay to go with feature?
It's good. Probably better.
Nice. Cool. Sorry. Ooh. Yeah, that's mine. You want to fight this guy?
I don't have a left-handed glove.
Like March I picked up all my stuff and they're still on my stuff. They're just like surrounding me. They're gonna carry me away. I'll take you to the leader out. Yeah, good.
Good. That was late.
Sorry. All right, tell me about what you think about using your offhand like that. Some of you guys have done it more than others.
Gross.
It was better than I expected.
Stabbing was a pain.
Stabbing's a pain?
I kind of
Difficult to block.
I use the crutch when I flow. I use a heavy sword for my dominant hand and usually use a lighter sword for my offhand. I was using my main one for my left, and I need to train more like some pel work.
Yeah, pel work is huge. Like just doing pel work, just doing like even just simple motions, and just like, like the pel sword that I use, I actually have a video of, but the pel sword that I use, what was it, 23 ounces?
Yeah, bamboo shoot.
Yeah, it's a, have you seen it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I watch your videos a lot.
It's a rattan sword, and it weighs like 23 ounces. Is that right? 23 ounces?
It's 10 ounces over your regular shoulder.
Yeah. And you know what? It's taken a lot of years and a lot of practice, but man, I can really hit my pel hard with that left hand. It just
That's to wear earplugs.
It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of hard work, right? But the point you want to like aspire to when you're fighting two sword is you really want to be as comfortable fighting with your left hand as your right. So the minute you can train your left hand, and your left hand will get to the point where it's competent on its own. Then you put a sword in your right hand or your dominant hand, then your other hand just doesn't do anything. So there's kind of like a stepping stone way to get there, right? That has kind of seemed tried and true. You fight a lot of single sword with your offhand. You learn a couple basic openers and a couple basic returns. Right? So basic openers, like my left hand on a right hand person, basic openers are your outside flat wrap, right? Your outside scoop wrap, and than just a straight chop. Whether that be a chop to the arm or like a cross-body chop, right? Or a down arm chop, right? And of course, there's always a good poke in there. So work those kind of like simple shots with your left hand, and you can really become fluid with those shots. And then you start seeing people's returns from those shots. When you throw an outside flat wrap, people return in, right? If you throw a chop to his inside, people will return out. If you throw low, people return high and inside if you throw outside, right? You have two lanes basically. In single sword, you have two lanes. So if this is my weapon, this is outside, this is inside, right? Outside my weapon, inside my weapon. Outside my weapon, inside my weapon, right? That make sense? So if you throw low, people tend to return high. It's not very often if I throw high that somebody's going to try to return higher than my hand, right? And then because my hand's higher than theirs, they'll want to return lower, right? That's just what they see. That's what they respond to. Yep. Yep. Right. So, fighting two-sword, you basically want to be able to be comfortable fighting somebody with your left hand, if it's your, or your less dominant hand, against basically their dominant hand. And if you're doing everything correctly, it almost boils down to a single sword fight with another weapon in your other hand, and they have something in their other hand. Right? And we'll kind of get towards that. So there's a couple basic things that I want to show you guys, and then I'm going to have you guys practice them with your single swords. Right? So on defensively, if somebody throws to your outside, I want you to be able to block with that hand and return with that hand. Right? If he goes quick, right? If he throws low, right? Anytime anyone throws outside, you should be able to block that with this hand and return with this hand. Right? Now, you'll see a lot of people, pretend like he's got a shield in his hand. You'll see a lot of people do this number that someone will throw outside, and they'll chop with this hand to take their arm. Okay? Now, in your basic two-sword, that's okay. However, he's got a shield in his hand. And if he covers his arm with his shield, and you swing and hit his shield, right? Rather than swinging with this hand and hit his shield, because he's moved his shield over here, now you have your right hand, so then you can hit him in the shoulder, or the hip, or whatever, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
Apologize for the interruption. Seniors report. Seniors, thank you, thank you. Everybody up here. Thank you. The one that's digging, I've seen yours already. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so, like I said, I want to see all of you guys take turns with your partner, practicing one of you guys throwing outside, and then you're returning inside once you catch that block. It's very simple, but it's actually really pretty hard to execute, like while fighting. It takes a lot of practice. Okay?
Straight again.
All right. So, yeah, we'll rotate. They'll throw outside on you. And you're going to catch that block, and you're going to return on down arm in the inside lane. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. Have at it.
You need somebody to spar with?
Yeah, I do.
So the other thing that you're doing is she's throwing on you.
Yeah, I want her.
And you're doing this. What you want to be doing is you want to be taking the block.
I want to make you block, but at the same time,
and just throwing straight in. Because if you do this, and let's say that she comes in with that block.
So you want to move their arm.
It's not that you necessarily want to move their arm, because if she's throwing out, then you see where I am right now? You see how my hips turn? So do it again. My hips turn out this way, so then my hips turn back.
Like I want it.
And basically what Aaron was saying was that this hip's turning back, so you end up here, and if you're doing
this sword is actually out of the fight. But if you're doing, both of these swords can still be in the fight because I actually haven't turned my hip this way. I've actually just moved them back to guard.
Make sure you're still, you still want to that block. So in order to block that, just turn your hand out just a little bit. So your knuckles turn out, and then throw the shot.
Yeah. It's like,
there you go. Good. Perfect.
So I'm doing
Right there,
this
the knuckles on top of my arm.
Yeah. Right. Good. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah. Okay, good. Keep working on that, switch hands and stuff. How I stick. The only thing with the way that you're doing it here, and I think it's partly because of the way the shot is coming in too, is you're almost pitching the block really narrow, and then you're turning your wrist out to
Yeah,
hit the shot.
I have to adjust for because he's coming straight down at me.
Right. If you actually, just to make this easier, a little easier for the drill.
But if you go up and your shoulder, that's dead.
Chop, just turn it into more like an outside wrap, so you're coming this way. And it'll be easier to catch. It'll be easier for both of you guys to catch the block out and then return to the inside lane.
I get that.
You guys having fun over there? Come on back in. Okay. All right. So that's a basic inside return from an outside lane attack on your hand match side, right? When I say hand match, I mean you're mirroring your opponent, right? So my left hand mirrors his right hand, right? Mirroring as in I was looking in a mirror and I held up my left hand. It looked like in the mirror I was holding up my right hand, right? Yeah. All right, good. So the opposite side of that is if they throw inside on you, what you want your defense to be, you want to block them, you want to stop the incoming shot, and you can either return down the arm, and his hand, he actually threw that really pretty nicely, because his hand was in a good place. If their hand's lower, you want to return the arm. If they throw their hand higher, to cut off that chop lane, you're going to return under it, either the arm or the hip, depending on how much distance you can break. Does that make sense? Now, when you're fighting two-sword, at any given time, you should never ever be close enough to somebody to allow them to stab you without taking a step. Does that make sense? Because our distance right now, because we're hand matched, we can't stab each other, right? Now, what makes this work? What makes this work for you, an advantage for you, is if he's got a shield in his hand, right? I can hit his arm with my right hand, I can hit his arm with my left hand, and he can hit my left arm with his weapon hand, right? And if he really reaches, he can hit my right arm, right? But his shield doesn't help him very much. And he can't stab me unless he takes a step. Right? If he takes a step, then he can stab me, but I can also stab him. Right? And then if he also takes a step, I can also hit him in the shoulder with my right hand. Right? So essentially, if I'm maintaining distance correctly, I'm fighting that hand with both of these. Does that make sense? Right? But I digress. Thanks, guys. So I'm gonna have you guys practice this now. So they throw inside on you, and you're gonna catch that block, and you're gonna return. You're gonna return to arm if their hand is under your hand. If their hand is over your hand, you're gonna return arm underneath their hand or hip. If you can reach one. Make sense? Any questions?
With dominant or offhand?
You want to do it when you're the one defending. Do it with your less dominant hand.
Defending.
Defending, yeah.
Okay.
So we have a switch. All right. All right.
Oh, we want to be
Oh,
on
so
the other hand. Yeah, that's one thing.
You can actually even like turn your body away.
Right back.
Before you throw to the outside lane. Right.
Yeah.
Block and then straight.
Good.
Now
So you throw.
right? Oh, I
You throw.
There you go. Oops.
So wait for me to
Yeah,
throw
you
first
want
on this.
Okay.
There you go. So now you throw.
So now you block. That's right.
Yeah.
So swing.
So inside.
Okay.
Block.
Block.
Yeah.
This is 101, right?
I mean, basically.
No, we don't
Uh-oh.
want you to film us.
Basically, think about it. You're going to throw to
I'm
the
good,
inside.
thank
Bring on my inside. That's what you want to do. You don't want to swing. Yeah, that's exactly.
So there should be a decisive block. Like you don't want to. So if I'm fighting him, like if your hand doesn't move, you're fine. What you want is to come in and there should be a block, pop, and there should be a return.
Okay.
Okay.
It's like a 1-2.
Precisely.
Yeah. So,
Here you go.
you help?
Great. So now instead of coming towards her inside lane, towards this lane, come towards her, or no, excuse me, coming towards her outside lane, come towards her inside lane so she can return on top of your
I see.
Yeah.
So like this.
Yep. There you go.
That leaves my shoulder wide open. That almost seems like a terrible idea to swing.
It does seem like a terrible idea to swing, right? But here's the thing.
In that direction.
Here's the thing. If I throw here, and this is the most obvious target, and you know where she's going to swing,
It's going to bait your shoulder right there. I got you.
Okay.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. That was totally wrong. Okay.
You swing that high and I block it.
All right, bring it back in. Bring it back in.
Do the same thing where it's like I'm fighting someone else. That's why we're working on him.
All right, bring it back in. Bring it back in. Okay. Any questions on that so far? Okay, an important distinction that I want to point out. Let's pretend that he's got his shield in his right in his left hand again. In every instance of every fight, when I'm fighting two-sword, the hand match, the hand that has the weapon in it, like if we're fighting a boardman, the hand that has the weapon in it, that's the hand I'm going to hand match. Okay? No matter what foot he has forward, it doesn't matter. I'm going to hand match that hand. Right? So he's got that weapon forward. I'm going to have my left foot forward. I'm going to have my left weapon forward. If he's left-handed, I'm going to have my right foot forward, my right hand forward. Right? So I'm going to be hand matched, right? Because if I do it like this, right, and I have this hand close enough so that I can strike his arm, what can he do to me? He can stab me. Right?
Yes.
Right? What's the biggest danger to two-sworders? Stabbing. Why?
No guard.
You don't have a big piece of wood in front of you.
No passive guard then. It's
Right?
all active.
Right? Now, that brings me to my next point. Like I said,
It's raining swords. Oh no.
okay. When you're fighting two-sword, you're going to do the majority of your killing with your hand-matched hand. That's why I showed you those two little few things. I tell you the honest truth, I kill probably 90% of the people I fight with those two things. that I just showed you. That's it. That's all I do. And the big thing is that I actually block and I actually return with the same hand. I don't do this shit. Okay? And when somebody swings at me, I don't do this. Right? Or this. Right? You're not a jumping bean, you're a two-sword fighter. Right? So, I do the majority of my killing with this hand. Now, I still have this hand. This hand's still important, right? It's important for different reasons. Because while this hand is trying to kill them, this hand's job is to keep this hand alive. Right? Now, like I said before, if he throws that outside, right, and I return down arm, and he brings this guy back, and I said, well, now your right hand's here, so you can hit him in the shoulder because he's brought his shield away from his shoulder, right? Once I swing with this hand, it becomes this hand's job to keep the right hand alive. Does that make sense? Now, how you keep them alive is you basically keep that weapon in the way of their weapon. Okay? Now, the way your lane defense is going to work, anything that goes outside of your hand-matched hand is this hand's job to defend. Anything on the outside out here, that's its job to defend. Right? Anything on like a really shallow inside is this hand's job to defend. Anything over here is this hand's job to defend. Okay? Now, if I throw outside, what did I say before? You want to keep this sword where? Between their weapon and your arm, right? So if I throw outside, I'm going to follow this guy with this. Keep my hand safe. I'm not going to do this because then I get killed. Yeah? Make sense? I'm going to throw here and keep my hand in the way. Right? Keep my hand safe. Now if you get strong enough with your hand match, your less dominant hand, you should be able to throw outside and catch returns with it. And so it leaves this hand a little more open to do different things to mess your opponent up, right? But as your less dominant hand's getting stronger and better, protect it with this hand, especially if you're fighting fighters who are really, really good or equal your skill level. You know, you need to give this hand's still in the fight, so let it protect this hand, all right? Now, when I talked about being stabbed, in order to stab me, okay, all he has to do is take like a short little step and he can stab me. If his stab's coming in from the outside, you need to block it with your hand-matched hand. If his stab's coming in from the inside, you need to block it with your other hand, with your inside hand. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay.
What if he's another Florenti and you're just doing that?
Fighting other two-sworders is a little bit different. Okay? Fighting other two-sworders is really pretty fun. So what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to have both your sticks and trade off pretending like one of you has a shield and one of you doesn't. And I want you, the two-sworder, to throw outside and let them return and either catch it with this hand or catch it with this hand. Okay? Don't care about what, don't move on past that. You want to survive. Right? The biggest misconception in fighting is the point of the game, right? The point of the game is to win. However, the point of the game is to win by not dying, right? Because if you die and they die, you both lose, right? Make sense? So how do you win?
Stay alive.
You don't die, right? How do they lose?
They die.
By dying. So you want them to die and you want to survive, right? Pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
So how do you survive?
Survive.
You don't die. You don't do stupid stuff, right? you don't do this. And you don't do this. Okay? Anytime you find yourself like dying a lot, watch why you're dying. Most likely you're dying because either you're coming at somebody like this with your hands split apart, and this hand is not in between their weapon and you, or you swung with this hand and you swung with this hand. Right? At all times, try to maintain protecting swing, having one hand to aggress and one hand to protect the hand that's aggressing. Now that's not saying you have one hand for defense and one hand for offense, because it can switch, and it'll switch really quickly. Once you get really fluid with it, it'll really quickly go from being here to here. Right? Okay, so, like I said, I want you to practice with your little buddy, and you'll both pretend like one of you will pretend like you have a shield and the other one has two swords. And I want you to throw outside on them, protect your hand either like this or like this. Okay? Make sense? And now, when you throw outside, a lot of times what will happen, they'll either return arm. If they're good, they'll try to stab you. Right? So, don't let them know what you're going to do. When you throw outside, either protect yourself from the chop and be watching for a stab. Okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Alright, have at it.
Block and defend. Okay. Throw while. So, alright, block. Go. I mean, attack.
So you're right hand, correct? So go ahead and switch your stance so that your left lead is forward. Act like I'm a righty boardman, more or less. I'm just going to hold my sword normally. And so basically, if I throw to, actually, I'm sorry, you're going to throw to my outside, and then I'm going to return. So you can either block it with that hand or with that hand. So when you throw to, throw an outside wrap so that you're leaving that opening, and then you can block, or you can keep the sword here and you can block there. So go ahead and throw. There you go. Perfect. Go ahead. Good. Good. Good.
Okay. This way.
I know. Good.
I'm in here.
Okay.
Good.
All right. Do it. Yeah. Aim where you hit.
Think about if it's going out there, put this here.
Yeah, basically. Anytime you would leave yourself exposed or open, your other hand should be covering that opening. Yeah, definitely. And anytime you swing, when you're fighting two swords, pretty much anytime you swing, your arm is going to be exposed. So that's why what he was talking about is if I throw here, my hand covers here. And then if I switch, my hand covers here. So I'm always covering that arm, basically. So go ahead. Perfect. And then kind of the caveat to this too is that, like what he was talking about not crossing both your hands over.
Make sure both of you guys are working
is
with
you have to be mindful of, well, if I were to keep this hand way over here, where do I look like I'm open? On this side, right? So again, if I'm open on this side though, if I'm fighting a boardman, like if you were a lefty boardman, your shot has to come, instead of coming on my same side, it has to come all the way across my body over here. So it's a much further reach. It's much easier for me to read. So I'd much rather be...
You can hide behind their shield.
Yeah, exactly. I'd much rather be exposed on the far side than on the same side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mechanical.
Go ahead.
You don't want to be exposed here where your weapon is.
Exactly. Good.
See, and then if you come across back for this arm,
yeah,
this is right here.
Absolutely.
It's so mechanical.
Your hand should still be able to, even when you're guarding, your hand should still be able to just turn a little bit to catch that cross body shot. Go ahead. See, even if I throw cross body, you should be able to catch that. Like, good. Now, if I reach, I might be able to catch that, but all you have to do is turn a little bit. Good, just like that.
So when she throws outside, or when she throws inside,
I'm going to actually switch between throwing to your inside and throwing cross body. And I just want you to try and read which one I'm going to throw and try to block one or the other, okay?
Sounds good.
So for this drill, you put it outside.
Good.
Throw out, or no, excuse me. When I throw out.
Sorry.
So that's
You don't need to get the whole of this all the way over
Exactly.
This longer one, particularly. That's enough.
Just keep in mind too that sometimes people, if people swing really hard on that, they'll still power through the end of your sword because most of your power is right here. So it's kind of a trade-off. You have to just be careful about it.
As long as you put enough there to slow it down.
Yeah, that's true too.
Should be back in your whole body. Stand how you're. So now she's going to return somewhere. Okay, so this is your block.
Yeah.
Now what do you have
no
to
way I
attack
can
her?
stab you if you've done that. So, and you want to catch the front of it too. If you catch it like way down, that's so. Good.
Oh, I want to. Yeah. Still block that outside.
Yep.
Yep. Probably to your hand or your shoulder.
Yep.
All right, what did you guys notice doing that?
We weren't dying.
I started focusing too much on my offhand.
Well, as a lefty, having someone do that, my bread and butter is blocking and responding.
Right.
It's really frustrating to go against someone who is good at it.
Right.
The closer your offhand is to your glove on your other hand determines how well you block. Because it's like she was walking up farther on her arm, so I was able to sneak into her forearm. But whenever she laid it on basically the wrist strap of her glove, she got the block every time.
Right. What else did you guys notice?
Baits across nicely.
Yeah.
Baits across nicely.
Yeah.
Baits across really well. What happens when somebody crosses on a two-sworder? Especially when your forward hand can do something. You hit their hip, their shoulder, their arm, you stab them in the armpit.
It's like a death
crotch,
buffet.
you know, whatever you want to do to them. You pretty much have your way with them. Right? What else did you guys notice?
The inlaying sword is the one always defending until you switch over.
Yeah. Well, what else did you guys notice? Anything else? Did anyone else find? Go ahead.
It was really easy to, you know, when you're doing this, kind of get lost in the moment and like, and do it wrong. Like
And
that.
either engage two hands too far.
Engage two hands too far, or try to do the same thing with both weapons.
I understand.
So that's, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed a lot of you guys too. Some of you guys did a pretty decent job with it, but I noticed a lot of you guys too. You would swing and your other hand would creep over here, and then you'd be like, "Oh shit!" and you bring it back. Right? It takes a lot of practice, right? It's not like the easiest thing to do to actually be able to fight two-sword and protect yourself well. So the biggest thing is to, once you leave here, continue practicing that. Don't go back immediately to swing and your other hand's over here and they swing and you're like, oh God, and try to run away and try to jump away and do these things, you know? Keep trying to remember to tell yourself to protect yourself, right?
What is we talk about the rest, and when you were doing this on the pill, what are you doing after this? Are you backing up and resetting? What are you doing the next steps?
I don't typically work my two swords on a pel. I typically just work my single weapon on a pel.
Say pill.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, any given fight, like once you catch that block, you know, start looking at what kind of options you have with this hand, because this hand's essentially free if you catch the block with this hand to attack that same forward hand or the forward hip, right? Look what's open, see how their shield moves, what happens when their shield moves. Should I switch to this hand quick and back? Yeah.
Just depends on what they're doing.
Right.
I'm hearing.
Yep.
Okay.
You got to watch what people are doing.
Okay.
That's like essentially fighting good two-sword is being able to watch what the other person does, and you know, do what's appropriate rather than like shitting and throwing, you know, trying to chop both their legs or trying to go like this or swinging with both hands at the same time, right? If you find yourself fighting two-sword and every time somebody closes on you and you like block and you find yourself throwing with this hand, like your backhand, the best thing you can do for yourself is just either go out single sword and fight. If you find that's too hard, get yourself a 12-inch sword and put it in your right hand. And you'll swing and be like, oh man, I'm so far away, I'm never gonna hit him. But that sword's long enough to protect you when you're throwing with this hand and fighting well with this hand. And if they step close enough and their shield comes over close enough, that sword's still long enough to step up and butter knife the shit out of their shoulder. Okay? Yeah.
So I started fighting with a shield and recently kind of converted over to a shorter down stick. And I have a bad habit of kind of doing what you were just talking about, using my backhand a lot, just kind of crossing over for blocks so I can, because usually this is too long to get in close, so if I have to block the bow, I want to be able to return either side. What kind of instances, usually when I've heard two-stick, you never ever really want to cross or any blocks or any attacks. There are rare occasions where, I mean,
there are occasions where I will cross-body block.
Right.
But rarely will they be to the, I mean, there are some extreme instances depending on like, you know, who I'm fighting. Especially some left-hand fighters, especially really good left-hand fighters, some of them will never cross. Like, there's a left-hand fighter named Rakir. He doesn't fight much anymore, I don't think. But he's really good, but he never crosses. And generally what devolves when I'm fighting him is I end up fighting him like this.
Right.
Because he just throws at my hip the whole time, and I just keep throwing at his arm over and over again. You know, so rare instances like that do happen. Or, like somebody will throw, like I'll throw like a real deep outside, and he'll throw like real high on my shoulder, and this hand will come up and block it up here, right? Rather than here, because it's quicker to punch it out here. But even then, my hand is still basically on my center line. It still isn't crossing over my center line. There'll be other rare instances where I'll protect my hip, like from here, but I'll actually, my hand's still on my center line.
So you just rotate.
Yeah, I'll turn in my hips and catch that block. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So you were saying you suggest probably using a real short sword or a dagger in your main hand just to get over that kind of crush.
Yep. That's the best way to do it. Either fighting just strictly single sword, and a lot of people just get the tar beat out of them, and so if you find that's too hard, you know, you can either fight with like a little tiny buckler, like a buckler the size of your hand, or fight with a little down sword. Like a little, you know, 12-inch sword is the best way to go, because you can punish people's shoulder with that still.
Awesome.
And you can project it a little bit, you know, down your arm to protect your arm.
I fought a lot of single sword offhand for years, and it helped my two-sword defense.
All right. Yeah, two swords is basically the one that I've kind of avoided until now, but it needs to happen.
Any other questions? All right. I think Kieran's gonna be starting his class here in a second. So the take-homes I want you guys to take from this class: what's the most important thing about fighting?
Don't die.
Not dying. What happens when you don't die?
You win.
You win, and you survive, right? What happens when you survive? You win, right? How do you lose?
Die.
You die, right? That's like the most important lesson you can possibly have. Now, I showed you guys a couple like real simple, like basic setups, like with your like forward hand, your hand matched hand. You always remember to hand match whatever hand they're leading with. Okay, whatever hand their weapon is. If you're fighting two-sword on two-sword, if you're fighting 2-on-2, the game changes a lot. And I I should just teach a completely separate class on fighting two-sword on two-sword because it gets a lot more complex. But to start off and to get yourself start seeing patterns in those fights, look at the person's feet, right? Coming into a fight. Now look at his feet. He's leading with his right foot. So what do you guys think I should do?
You should lead with your left.
Yeah, hand match with my left, right? Because what does that do?
It keeps your axis on the same side so you can block.
Not an easier target.
Not an easier target? Why?
Because your body's like that. He can't easily stab you. If he's what do you call it? His foot's this way, your foot's this way. Then if he tries to stab you, you can easily have it go past you.
True. You're profiled to him, so it's harder for him to stab with his forward hand. What hand can he stab me with?
His offhand.
Yeah,
The right. His offhand,
they're
right?
get closer.
What's in the way of his offhand? Your offhand.
sword.
My offhand. Yeah?
Yep.
And if I'm distancing myself correctly, even if he can stab me with his forward hand, right? At like extreme range, can he stab me with his offhand?
No.
No. Right? I can stab him with my forward hand. Right? And a lot of times you'll find people who will try to stab you with their offhand, and if you're fighting it correctly, like you won't even be in range. So when they stab at you with their offhand, and you've got this hand out here in the way, they'll go to stab, and you're just like, right? But the big things like the basic things to really start to watch for when you start fighting other two swords is watch their feet. If somebody changes their feet a whole bunch, like when they're like getting ready to fight you, because they don't really know what they're trying to do and don't really know what they're doing. Fighters who know what they're doing, they'll know what foot they're going to fight with, right? But they keep switching their feet. They keep going like this. From your previous fights with them, watch what hand you think is their dominant hand and hand match that hand, right? Because if he's dancing around like that, I'll be like, oh, he's probably right-handed. You know, and I'll hand match that hand. Another thing I'll do is if I really don't know, then I'll fight them, then I'll put my dominant hand forward and just put the stick to him. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Alright? So hand match with your feet. Protect yourself with one sword while you're aggressing with the other. Right? And like I said, it's a big distinction between having one hand for defense and one hand for offense. Because you need to be able to switch quickly. Make sense? Any questions? Yep.
How important do you think sword symmetry is in Florentine?
Sword symmetry? Like having the same length swords?
And weight.
You know what? I think that comes down to your hand.
Okay.
Now, if you're going to fight two sword, I'll almost always put, and I'm going to have swords that are different lengths, I'll almost always put the longer sword in my left hand. The hand I'm hand matching with most.
Okay.
Or if I come, if I'm fighting hand matching like with my left hand dominant a lot, and then I come upon a left-handed fighter, if they're a good fighter, I'll even switch to put the longer sword in my hand matching hand.
Okay.
For the same reasons that, you fight with that butter knife with your right hand. Yeah. Like to train your left hand to fight. But, because years and years I fought almost strictly with my right hand, and then I started taking two swords seriously and started teaching my left hand how to fight. So if anything, sometimes I'll put a heavier weapon in my right hand so that I can crush shields and stuff like that, knock shields down with it, and just so I have something firmer to catch a block with.
Right.
But that's just personal
with
preference.
Like a bell-weighted sword and aim guard in my right hand. My left hand, just every time I get chopped down, I feel like a little bit gimpy, and I kind of go for all or nothing shots with my left hand with this sword.
Yep. And that'll just take a lot of power work to get over that. But yeah. Any other questions? Comments, concerns? Alright. Have a good rest of the battle for the ring. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No problem.